So what do you get when you combine a lot of great heavy-hitting modern prog musicians and ask them to do a pop album? Well, what you get is flying colors. Let's dive in.
Take me where the river meets the sea, to the city made of glass.
Flying Colors' debut album, Flying Colors. So Flying Colors is a very strange kind of a band when you look at it on paper. Brian Evans decided to get all these musicians rounded up to create their own semi-supergroup of sorts. The idea was to put Steve Morse and Dave Laurie from the Dreaddixies, and Steve Morse is actually credited for playing a lot with Deep Purple, which is where I kind of know him from, with such heavy hitters such as Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater. And the whole reason why I'm reviewing this album, outside of the fact that it's a fantastic album, is I'm doing it in prep of A Similitude of a Dream, Neal Morse's latest album that's coming out later on this year. I'm looking back at all of the other albums and past projects that he's been involved with, so I'm taking a look at one of each. Starting us all off is Where We Have Ourselves Here. This is a really interesting starting point for me because their second album was the first album that I ever reviewed. It was the whole reason why I started this channel. So revisiting this album, it stirred up a lot of great emotions for me. And that's one thing that I could say honestly, is that there's a lot of great positive emotions surrounding this, kind of a more poppy approach to music. And I think this was kind of the point. I know a lot of these musicians have been playing with a very specific style for so long, and they're big fans of that accessible pop music. I mean, when Neal Morse was first starting off, he wanted to be more of a pop star. So I'm sure a lot of these ideas were floating around in his head, as well as a lot of those other individuals. This kind of let those musicians stretch their legs and play that particular style. And when I'm thinking about this album, I can put each song into one of three categories. They're either that very poppy, very energetic, very happy kind of a sound, you know, that kind of celebration of music. The other one's a little bit more edgy, a little bit more heavy hitting, and the other one is a little bit more on the experimental side. They're a little bit longer, they're introducing the listener to more of a prog tinge, but never falling face first into it. So the album opens up with Ocean Blue, and it's definitely of that latter category, of more of that proggy style. But they're also introducing all of the listeners to that style in the perfect way. Most of the people that have been listening to these past artists would probably be expecting more of a proggy approach. So Neal Morse is being a little bit more subdued. I find it on some of his other projects you can really feel his presence. But here it's more of almost like a producer feel, where he's kind of orchestrating behind the scenes and just providing those flares and those inputs. The second track of Shoulda, Woulda, Coulda is definitely of that second category, of a little bit more heavy, a little bit more in your face, but never quite towing that line straight up into that metal scene. And again, this is a great way of structuring the album. The first song has that great introduction. The second one shows that those who came in from more of a metal scene, you're still getting that here, but it is in more of an accessible and poppy. And then the third track, this is where the band could have reached mainstream audiences. KAYLA is that single, and I mean single with a capital S, where you can put it on a 45, and it's also a fan favorite. It's very catchy. Those three songs lining up showcases the three categories that we have here, of that poppy, very mainstream style of music, but also complex enough that it makes an individual like me very excited to listen to it. You also have the heavier hitting one, and then you have more of the complex one. The Storm follows up KAYLA, and the Storm is kind of that first category that I was speaking about, where it's very poppy and very accessible, and it just showcases the musicians just playing a very simple song. The harmonies are great, it's very catchy, and it's also this is one of those songs where I was talking about of being very intimate and very personal. And Forever and a Daze is that a heavier hitting song. I always picture, say, like the middle-aged women really getting down and saying, oh yeah, I love rock music, I love that heavy hittier songs. And Forever in a Daze would be that kind of a song that I could see those individuals latching on to. The sixth song of Love Is What I'm Waiting For is my favorite track off of this album, and my favorite track that Flying Colors has ever done. It is poppy enough and bouncy enough to catch my interest. It's one of those earworms. It just gets into your head and you can't get it out. It's gushing with cheese as well, and it's great that this is kind of that midpoint of the album as well. It kind of gives us a good grounding point, and for an individual like me that loves a good midpoint, this provided that perfectly. Everything Changes, the next song, is actually a really interesting song because it uses that technique of changing very, very quickly. The idea of the song is conveyed very well with the style of music that's being conveyed. And it's definitely in that last category of that experimental, kind of proggy, and it's also a little bit longer as well, so people can sink their teeth into that aren't normally used to sinking their teeth into longer songs. The next song of Better Than Walking Away is probably the slowest song. This is as close as the band has gotten to almost like a love ballad. And oddly enough, as I said, that was probably the most mellow track. It's followed up with All Falls Down, which is probably the hardest hitting track on here. Mike Portnoy throughout this whole album has been a standout player by bringing enough oomph to the songs and providing enough complexities within the rhythm section, but not so much that it's taking it out of the album. This song is definitely where he shines, and he kind of takes forefront here as well. The next song up is Fool of My Heart, which is, again, it's that kind of poppy song. It's probably more of a love ballad than Better Than Walking Away, even though it's not as heavy hitting. But I know that the band is having a great time with this, and you can definitely feel that as well. You know that even though this is the band's first album, and each of these musicians are coming from completely different backgrounds, they're still very comfortable playing with one another, and they're having a ball, and you can't help but have a little bit of fun here as well. And the final song, rounding this whole album off, is Infinite Fire, and this is definitely that latter category of more of a proggy approach to music. I mean, it is coming in at 12 minutes long, so I can see a lot of people clocking out at this point, but being that it's the final track and the closer track, I think it's a great idea for them to close on such a long song because it does give those individuals who are coming in from a different background than, say, the progressive rock, it allows them to kind of dip their toes into that kind of a style. And I do love that meaty hook that Steve Morse is providing. It is such a great such a great treat. And where this song goes is also very great as well. It doesn't go all over the place, it does kind of stay contained within its box, but doing so allows the rest of the band to kind of stretch their legs into more of an accessible style of music. Overall, I love this album, and it's one that I come back to time and time again. I love how accessible it is, and I love how optimistic and happy it is, and it's also an opportunity for me to listen to more catchy tunes without going straight up into like the top 40s. So I definitely have to say, you've got to pick this guy up if you can find it. It is a great treat and something different to have in your collection as well. It provides a little bit more of contrast from those artists that I love listening to. So that's about it. What did you guys think of the debut self-titled album from Flying Colors? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting below. The next album up that I'll be revisiting is Spock's Beard Snow album. It won by a landslide. I'm going to be having a lot of fun diving into that one. Check that guy out, coming out very, very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching once again. And until next time, notes out.